Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, in the wake of the recent round of deadly fighting in Gaza, where does this leave those wanting peace, and especially the women pushing for an end to violence? I'll be talking shortly to Palestinian activist Huda Abuarquob from the Alliance for Middle East Peace and Israeli Robi Damelin from the Parents Circle. And a heavy metal band with a difference. We meet the female headbangers who keep their headscarves on as they wow the audience in Indonesia. But first, and as the dust begins to settle in the wake of the latest conflict in Gaza, the international community's focus is turning now to rebuilding the Palestinian coastal enclave. During the 11-day conflict, at least 256 Palestinians, including 65 children, were killed during the Israeli bombardment. On the Israeli side, 12 people, including 2 children, were killed from the more than 4,000 Hamas rockets fired into Israel. And within Israel itself, massively violent street clashes occurring between Jews and Arabs. But as the cycle of violence continues in the region and becomes even bloodier each time, where does this leave the push for peace? And how much are women involved? Joining me now from the Palestinian city of Hebron is Huda Abuarquob, the regional director for the Alliance for Middle East Peace, and from Jaffa in Israel, Robi Damelin from the Parents Circle Families Forum. Thank you, both of you, for giving us some of your time. Let me start with you, Huda. Here we are again, with the region picking up the pieces after yet another breakout of violence. Amid all this despair, is there any glimmer of hope at all when it comes to making peace?
Of course, Annette. People like us who are being exposed to structural violence on a daily basis, if they lose hope, then there is no way out of it. I think hope is a luxury that we cannot afford losing as people who are living in Palestine and in Israel, especially women. If we lose hope, then we lose the future of our children.
Robi, what are your thoughts?
Well, of course, you can't give up. You can't lose hope, because hope is the most important equation in the whole peace process. And looking at the role of women now more important than ever, think about these children that are growing up in Gaza with no hope and no future. And so what are they going to be like as adults after what they've been through? And what about the children who live on the border in Ashkelon, Ashdod, and all of these towns? What kind of adults are they going to be? And so for women now, more than ever, we need to teach our children nonviolence and reconciliation.
Huda, you've been on our show before talking about how Palestinian women have been sidelined in the past when it comes to decision-making. Is that still the case, given the ever-growing number of highly educated professional women in Palestine?
One sign of hope that I'm holding to in the last few days and after the escalation is that women did not stay home, and women did not accept the fact that they are always portrayed as the victims. They are actually taking to the streets. They are doing conferences. They are meeting with all kinds of people in order to pick up the pieces, to use your term, Annette, because I think this is what we are now doing. So the hope that women are not giving in to all the anti-voices, anti-women, anti-normalization, anti-Semitism, anti-Jews, anti-Muslims. Women are not giving in to these voices, and they are getting out to pick up the pieces and build a future for the people that we care more about, which is our children. We cannot have a state, we cannot have peace, we cannot have security if we don't have this secured first for our children.
Robi, I want to ask you, what actually happens when you bring Israeli and Palestinian women together for the first time? Well, what is the experience like?
Well, it depends, but in many cases, in our case, because they are generally bereaved, for Palestinian women, it's terribly difficult because it's actually the first time that they may have had an opportunity to tell their story. And so when they do tell their story, they talk about the logistics of the death, how many bullets there were, how much blood there was, how far was the gun, all of the logistic details. But then the more they get the opportunity to tell their story, suddenly they start to talk about the person that died. And that's the next step in healing. But considering this war that has just been and the parallel narrative on both sides, that is what the Palestinians saw on media and what the Israelis saw on media, is like two different planets. So within our own group, in the parent circle, we've decided that we must do a 3-day retreat to be able to regain all of that trust and the love that exists between us, because we have to stand together against this violence.
Huda, are there any novel approaches that can be used to break the deadlock?
Of course. At the end of the day, our leaders who have no sense of responsibility sit on the table and start negotiating very narrow political interest. So it's about time for us to get them out of that table and sit instead of them. I am serious about this. The more we involve women, the more we involve youth, because both leaderships have no representation of youth. And we are leaving our youth out of this conversation to the extent that they are adopting the hate narrative. And if this is the case, then we actually have no future. But what we need to do now is to change the leadership, not only in Israel and Palestine, it's also all over the world. Every leadership that is not giving a chance for the youth and for women to lead, they will have to leave at some point. And women are determined to give themselves a space on the table, but also give youth a space on the table. One of the things that we need to address here is the trauma that is ongoing on both societies, but mainly also on the Palestinians. We cannot just give in to that trauma and not deal with it. The Israelis also have to deal with that trauma and move towards building a sustainable strategic peace between two people rather than two very narrow-minded leaderships.
And Robi, what would you say to that?
Well, of course, Huda's right. But the question is, how do we do all of this? How do we trust each other? One of the wonderful parts about having Zoom, even though it might be just people in little squares, is that the Palestinians and the Israelis can engage without the Palestinians having to ask permission from the powers that be. That is a huge advantage. We can also open ourselves to people from all over the world who have gone through conflicts. As Huda said, to the Irish, we can learn lessons from them. They can also learn lessons from us. And mainly this question of how do I give up being a victim and become a survivor? This is what we need to be looking for. And I think women have the intuition and the push to do that.
Robi and Huda, thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Thank you, Annette.
And finally, meet VOB, Indonesia's hijab-wearing, head-banging, all-female heavy metal band. Their biggest battle, though, has been not so much to gain fans, but instead win over their parents in a highly conservative Muslim society. Erin Agonki reports.
All female in donning the hijab, they may not be the first image of a heavy metal band that comes to mind. But after years of mastering their talent at music festivals across Indonesia, the Voice of Basaprat Band, or Noisy Voice in English, now counts some of rock music's biggest stars among their fans. And yet finding support from family and friends wasn't always easy.
Since I started reading books, I now have the courage to speak my mind. But in our village, being too outspoken is seen as inappropriate. So our parents were often mad at us. It also made it hard for us to make friends.
Their 2018 hit, School Revolution, a critique of Indonesia's strict education system, propelled their popularity in their home country. But with their lyrics now more centered on universal themes, including feminism and environmentalism, they hope to expand their reach to international listeners.
Terus selain itu musik juga udah jadi
Music is like a diary to me and the other girls.
Terus
It's a place for us to be happy and share happiness with other people.
Kebahagiaan itu kepada orang lain.
If the audience can get something out of our music, like a message, then we're grateful.
Itu ya.
But we've never felt obliged to send certain messages through our music.
Ini tuh harus nyampein sesuatu gitu ke audiens gitu, enggak.
Hoping to one day perform at the U.S. music festival Coachella, the girls have ambitious goals for the future. But in the meantime, they say, they're mostly focused on drawing inspiration from their heroes, the women in their hometown.
And that's it for now. You can also connect with us via our Facebook page, that of course being France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. So until our next show, bye for now.